Welcome to the second presentation in this video series where we are focusing on aspects of critical thinking. This session we will cover fallacies. What are fallacies? So, a failing in reasoning which makes an argument invalid. So, faulty reasoning. That's what we're really discussing when we're talking about fallacies. So, one example of a fallacy is correlation and causation. And this is something that you may come across within your research areas, respectively. An example that we have here, just a made-up version, is the increase in ice cream sales is correlated with the increase in crime rates. Now, that doesn't mean that one is causing the other. As you can see, ice cream sales increase through the summer months, but also crime rates increase through the summer months. Now, there has to be a third factor here which is causing both to increase rather than ice cream sales causing crime rates to increase, or the opposite way round. Sufficient conditions. Okay, so an example of sufficient conditions fallacy here. All pandas are owned by the Chinese government. This animal is owned by the Chinese government, so it must be a panda. But there is some faulty reasoning within those statements and within them conclusion. The next statement, all pandas are owned by the Chinese government. This animal is a panda, so it must be owned by the Chinese government. And that one is an example of no faulty reasoning. Okay, so that is a logical statement and a logical conclusion. Now, fallacies, one of them is to appeal to emotions. If you don't give me a job, I really don't know what I'm going to do. I've got nothing. You are my only hope, please. Okay, and in an interview process or job application, really, the interviewer is going to be focusing on the credentials rather than any personal aspects of the individual. So, false analogies. Some comparisons can be invalid. A comparison is not valid if the items being compared are not similar enough, the comparison is misleading, or the item used for comparison is described inaccuracy. And an example of this, cloning of human cells should never be allowed. It will create another Frankenstein. We do not want such monsters. However, we do not know that the cloning of human cells will create another Frankenstein. So there's a false analogy there. Another one is false dichotomies. Similarly, some contrasts are invalid. However, a false dichotomy wrongly implies there are just two opposing options. Are we human or are we dancer? Now, this statement infers that you can only be human or a dancer, which of course is incorrect. Another example of a fallacy that can be used is misrepresenting opposing arguments by presenting them in an unfair and unbalanced way. It attacks the misrepresented idea instead of the actual argument that is presented. Now, this statement, we shouldn't give out study skills guides to all students. If we give everyone easy first, then their degrees will be worthless. Now, that is attacking the argument in a misrepresented or unbalanced way. Just because we give all students study skills books, it doesn't mean that they will automatically get first class honours degrees. And even if a high percentage of people do get first class honours degrees, it also doesn't mean that they are worthless. The next one is unwarranted leaps, drawing conclusions which go far beyond the evidence provided. Adding together 2 and 2 to make 5, so jumping to conclusions. An example here: if there were tolls for using roads, people would use public transport. Polls indicate that most people want the traffic flow to be improved. This shows that people would be willing to support the introduction of tolls. Now, if a poll indicates that most people want the traffic flow to be improved, you are then making an unwarranted leap to suggest that those individuals are in support of toll roads. The slippery slope is another example of a fallacy. A small, seemingly insignificant event will lead to a more significant event, which will lead to an undesirable outcome. This chain of events is usually improbable, also known as the thin end of the wedge or the domino fallacy. An example of that: if we let the children choose a film they watch, they'll expect to be able to choose where we go on holiday or what school they go to. So one small, seemingly insignificant event of letting a child choose their own film is going to lead to the child choosing their own holiday or what school they want to go to, which is most definitely not the case. Now, the last one we have here is ad hominem, which is Latin for at the person. Attacking the person instead of the idea. That's a thing to say. What would a posh old Etonian like you know about it anyway? You don't have a right to speak on the issue. So, irrelevant of what the argument is being put forward by the posh old Etonian, this person has attacked the person rather than attacking the argument or developing a counter argument for the argument that's been presented. And then also here we have a post-session activity. So read the journal article called Appeal to Fear in Healthcare, Appropriate or Inappropriate. Think about the appeal to fear as a fallacy and just write some notes down as you go through every time you see appeal to fear fallacy.